Good morning, and welcome to this installment of Mike's Vehicle Vlogs. Thank you so much for joining me today, as I am accompanied by one of the greatest vehicle types ever, the minivan. Now you may be wondering to yourself, why am I saying that this is one of the greatest vehicle types ever? It just is. The minivan, I think, is completely underrated by people who don't drive minivans on a daily basis or have never driven a minivan at all. Plus, people who are driving minivans, for the most part, are parents. I'm not a parent, but I do enjoy driving a minivan. Now, I'm here today accompanied by this 2012 Toyota Sienna LE, which the dealership that I work for has graciously allowed me to borrow for the purpose of this video. We have two of these Siennas right now at my dealership. We have this 2012. We also have a 2011 that has less miles than this one, and we have a 2010 Honda Odyssey. I chose this Sienna because, well, it's honestly my favorite out of the three that we currently have. But we only have three. If this were 10 years ago, there would probably be a much more trade on these minivans. Because around this time 10 years ago, not only did we have more manufacturers over here in the States giving you a bigger variety of minivans, but in the mid-2000s and so, a lot of people were switching over to SUVs and crossovers, big time. So if this were my dealership 10 years ago, we would probably have a more of a variety of used minivans to choose from rather than just three. Now, if you've been following this vlog series for quite some time now, then you have seen all the videos where I've talked about all of the cars that my family has personally owned from the time, from my childhood up until just, years ago. And the majority of the cars that we've had have been minivans. So the majority of my childhood life, I've been riding around in a minivan. I've been learning to drive in a minivan. I got my permit when we had a minivan. I mean, I was driving a minivan at the age of like 6. So needless to say, I really do like the minivan. And not just because it's something that I've grown up with, but the way a minivan drives, the way that a minivan handles, and just the overall seating position and such inside of a minivan is different than any other car, truck, SUV that you'll probably ever drive. So there's just something about the way a minivan feels when you're behind the wheel that I personally like. But as the years have gone by, the minivan, I'm sure at some point will be completely phased out, as at this point in time, many vehicle owners are turning to SUVs, and they've been going to SUVs for years, but the crossover segment is becoming bigger than ever in the automotive market. I mean, look at the fact that Ford is completely wiping away their entire car lineup. 5 car models that are not trucks, SUVs, or crossovers. They're just completely discontinuing because they want to focus more of their energy on crossovers. So the car market is already going down. The minivan is probably not going to be far behind it. The minivan has had an excellent run. The minivan has been out for so long. I'm really surprised that we still have a pretty decent amount of manufacturers at this time who are still putting minivans out on the road. So for those of you who don't know the history of the minivan, it dates back all the way to 1984. And Chrysler was the very first manufacturer to bring you a minivan. And basically what they did was they had taken their newly developed K-car parts, which the K-car platform was a huge platform for Chrysler. It allowed them to build multiple vehicles using a lot of interchangeable parts, and it pretty much saved Chrysler from bankruptcy in the 80s. They used that to create the very first minivan, which was the Dodge Caravan. Now, there were, of course, other vans on the market in, of course, like the 70s and 80s, but the minivan was different. It was it was smaller than your conversion van, I guess I can say. It was more so of like a station wagon at the time, but it had a little more ground clearance, and you had the one sliding door on the passenger side. It gave you 3 rows of seats, which on average you can get 7 people in a minivan, plus you still have room in the back to carry cargo. The big thing for Chrysler too was that it was a front-wheel drive vehicle. A lot of vans from like the 70s and early 80s that were the larger conversion vans basically were all rear wheel, and front-wheel drive was still somewhat of a new platform at the time. And of course the advantages of the front-wheel drive is you get better traction when it's wet or snowy outside, so you didn't have to really worry about spinning out with your van because of the the long wheelbase, and if you're making that corner you don't have to worry about sliding out. So the front wheel drive platform was a really good platform for a minivan to have. But it didn't take long for other manufacturers to start following suit from Chrysler's innovation. GM was following along with, it was minivan, but it was also kind of built off of somewhat of a truck platform. But General Motors came out with the Chevrolet Astro and the GMC Safari, which were a little higher up, and they were still rear-wheel drive, but they did have 3 rows of seats, so you could still get 7 people in this van. But it was still somewhat of like a conversion van. It just didn't really have a minivan feel to it. Then Ford came along and they brought out the Aerostar. The Aerostar was more of a minivan. It was not as bulky as the General Motors products at that time. So yeah, the Aerostar was more of a suiting minivan, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. By the very early 90s, and I mean like 1990, GM started catching up as far as the actual minivan platform. They brought out the completely fresh out of the box Chevrolet Lumina APV, which was the minivan that looked like a spaceship. It was, I still think they look awesome to this day, but just the rounded out windshield, the nose just went straight down like that, and it's just a awesome van. I honestly feel like it's a timeless design. But at the time in 1990, it probably looked like something that came out of the Jetsons. I could only imagine being a child, like older than I was in the 90s, and seeing a Lumina APV for the first time. But alongside that, GM also put out the Pontiac Transport and the Oldsmobile Silhouette. So they had expanded their lineup, and I do believe they were still making the GMC Safari and the Chevrolet Astro. Those vans, actually lasted for a very long time, maybe even after that. And then down the line somewhere, Ford decided to come out with the Windstar, which was more of your traditional minivan look at this time. It didn't look like the Aerostar. The Aerostar actually was discontinued in 1997, and the Windstar had came out in 1995. So they actually overlapped each other for a while, and then the Windstar just kind of stuck from there. Chrysler was still making the Dodge Caravan, the Plymouth Voyager, and the Chrysler Town & Country, while GM was revamping their minivans in the mid-90s to the Chevrolet Venture, the Pontiac Transport Montana, which would eventually just become the Montana by itself, and the Oldsmobile Silhouette. So by the mid-90s, all of the minivans were looking more like this. There wasn't a whole lot of eccentric design. They all just started to kind of fit to a similar mold, which I think was more appealing to a lot of buyers at the time. People who were kind of skeptical about that eccentric, Lumina APV design, or the Aerostar's original design. The minivan took more of a shape that everybody can probably agree on and enjoy. But then by the late 1990s and into the early 2000s, things started to change. We definitely had many more van manufacturers out there who were putting minivans on the market, such as Toyota, who in the late 90s had the Sienna minivan out. But even before the Sienna, they had what was called the Previa, which was a very eccentric minivan. The engine of this minivan was actually, I believe, under the driver's seat, or somewhere underneath the front of the cabin. So again, it's like everybody who introduced the minivan started off with these really eccentric designs, and then by the time the mid to late 90s came about, they kind of went in a way that looks a little more less eccentric. But not only did you have Toyota in the game, but you have Honda's Odyssey, you had Nissan's Quest, you had Mercury, had a van out. I can't remember the name of it at this time, but they had a van out at the time. So the minivan market was in full bloom by then, but we also had the SUV market blowing up, and we were finally starting to see the first of the crossovers. I know where you guys know this is going. But it was because of Pontiac. They took their Montana minivan and gave it eccentric styling on the outside, and we have the Aztek. The Aztek was one of the very first crossovers to be introduced, and that's probably one of the reasons why I like the Aztek so much, is because even though it's not a minivan, yet built off of minivan parts for the most part, it's got that particular driving feel without looking like a minivan. The Aztek doesn't have 3 rows of seats, it only seats 5 people. But it did have the same power plant. It had ground clearance that was similar. It might be a little higher than the Montana minivan was. Had the short nose like the Montana did. So essentially the Aztek is like a minivan without the minivan looks. It's really sad that the Aztek was received poorly just because of the way it looks, but I think that's why a lot of people who drive an Aztek can appreciate them so much, because of how they handle. So even though the Aztek wasn't received too well in the early 2000s, there were other manufacturers who were introducing crossovers, and it was almost at a rapid rate. If you look at it today, there are only a small handful of minivan models out there compared to what was out there like 10 some years ago. General Motors no longer makes any minivans. The last of their minivans ended roughly around 2009, 2010, but by that time all of their lineups, all of their brands had a minivan in it. GM was still making the Venture, but at that time it was called the Uplander. Pontiac had what was called the SV6 Montana. Oldsmobile was gone, so Oldsmobile, there was no model from them. But Saturn even had a minivan, and I do believe it was called the Relay. And Buick had one, and I think it was called like the Teresa or something like that. So for a short time, all of GM's brands had a minivan under their belt. But by the end of like 2009, 2010, somewhere around there, the vans were just done. And now GM has no minivans. They are focusing more on their crossover lineup. Their equivalent to a minivan would be the Chevrolet Traverse, the Buick Enclave, and the GMC Acadia. Ford also has no more minivans at this time. Their last of the minivans was a spin-off of the Windstar, which was called the Freestar, and I do believe it was also in the mid to late 2000s where they quit making that. They do have the Transit Connect. The Transit Connect you can get with passenger seating like a minivan, but it's not full size and it doesn't really drive like a van at all. Not like this. So if you want to consider that a minivan, maybe you can, but it's more of a multi-purpose vehicle, I think is what they classify that as. Chrysler is one of the only few manufacturers left who introduced a brand new minivan called the Pacifica, which the name was carried from a crossover that they had also in the late 2000s. But the Pacifica seems to be one of the only new van models out there. And Chrysler, from things that I keep reading and hearing, could be going under, because they only have two models right now, the Chrysler 300 and the Pacifica. So if Chrysler ends up going down the drain, maybe the Dodge name will take the Pacifica. I don't think they're going to want to get rid of that, because it's a brand newly designed vehicle, and well, it is a nice one. I did like looking at the Pacifica when I reviewed it for MVS last year, so it was nice. It was a nice van. The Dodge Grand Caravan hasn't really been changed at all in, wow, like 10 years or so. Nissan's Quest is gone. They don't make the Quest anymore, so Nissan, at least over here in the States, is out of the minivan market. Honda still makes the Odyssey, and Toyota does still make the Sienna, which I do believe is now different from this. It's not the same generation Sienna as seen here, but those vans are still in the game. So yeah, it's going to get to a point where kids of this generation are not going to know what it's like to drive through a suburbia neighborhood in all over America and not see minivans just sitting in driveways all across the neighborhood. It's not really gonna be the same as it was when I was growing up, which is kind of sad. Because like I said, eventually the minivan will probably end up being as defunct as the models that have already been killed off by multiple auto manufacturers. So that being said, let's go ahead and take a closer look at this 2012 Toyota Sienna, show you guys what this van features, why I like it so much, and why I'm jealous that I did not get to have one of these vans when I was a kid. So the minivan has changed in many ways compared to the first original minivan. There's a lot more comfort in a minivan, there's a lot more convenience in a minivan, but nonetheless, all minivans still serve the same purpose: to carry a bunch of kids with cargo all at the same time. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to only carry kids in a minivan. If you have a lot of friends, or if you just have a lot of cargo, you can still use a minivan to serve that purpose. But anyway, this is a 2012 Toyota Sienna LE. It is a very nice minivan, and I have honestly always wanted to drive one of these, especially of this generation. I love the way that this van looks. I love its sleek looking design. I think the new Sienna kind of carries over some of these traits, which is nice. So we'll take a look at the outside features. This particular Sienna has projector beam headlights with halogen bulbs. We've also got the chrome accenting at the front grille, which is done in black. Large Toyota logo up there up front. No fog lamps on today's model. Side profile, we have these 5-spoke aluminum wheels, color matching door handles, color matching mirror caps with heated mirrors, tinted windows. We've got a roof rack up on top. In the back we have large LED tail lights. There's an integrated spoiler that kind of sits at the top of the back window. All minivans today have 2 sliding doors now, one on both sides. So that's the outside of the Sienna. Let's head inside. The inside of the minivan is where all of the magic happens. And I particularly like the way the Sienna interior is set up for the most part. I think it is nicely furnished. These seats are made up of a cloth fabric that is very, very soft to the touch. The seats are also very comfortable in my opinion. I feel like I have nice side support also with these small side bolsters here. All of the captain's chairs, which are the 2 up front and the 2 in the second row, all include armrests for their passengers. Interior door trim consists of a door handle, your all your window controls, door lock controls. The mirrors are powered, and the power mirror controls are placed on the dashboard in front of you. Sitting in a minivan that doesn't feel like any other car. Like, these seats in a minivan are typically a lot higher than that of even a lot of SUVs don't offer this kind of seating support. Like, I'm a taller person, so maybe that's why I enjoy it. You know, I'm about 6 feet tall, and I am sitting in this seat so comfortably. My legs don't have to be stretched out like they would be if I was driving a sedan or some SUVs. I have to even have the seat all the way back and my legs are stretched out. But in this particular seat, and like just about every other minivan that I've ever been in, I can sit here and my legs don't have to be stretched out. I can get to the pedals really easily, and it's just a nice higher up position, and that's really the only way that I can best describe it. And I think that's why I like driving a minivan so much, is because of that particular feel. Just, I don't know, I just feel so comfortable sitting in the minivan, and I get a similar position when I'm driving my Aztek also. We'll take a look at the back seats. So as I mentioned, the second row of this Sienna has 2 captain's chairs for 2 additional passengers. These seats can also be moved back and forth for additional leg room. As mentioned, both sides have armrests for your passenger who is ever sitting in the seat. And in the way back, you have a 60-40 split bench seat that'll hold 3 additional persons. Now the cool thing about this particular model is there's a spot here where you can put an 8th seat there. So you can turn this into an entire bench seat if you wanted to. And that seat is actually equipped on today's model. So here is the cargo area of the minivan, of the Sienna I should say. And the mats are still down here, but these seats can be folded down like so. And if these weren't down there, they go completely flat, so you would have a completely flat load floor. I honestly think this is a really cool design. How you just have to pull this handle, pull it back toward you, and it folds nicely. But you can't do that when there's stuff on the bottom as such. Here is the 8th seat. It sits in this little tiny compartment. It's not very big. It's what it looks like. And you somehow get it to latch in between those seats in the second row, and it creates a bench seat. I have no idea how to really do it. I tried doing it, but I cannot figure it out. Yeah. I just think that's cool. Back here there's also a light and a 12-volt power outlet. In here, probably your jack tools. Yep. Back up here in the driver's seat, you got a nice wide dashboard. Yet all of the controls really aren't that hard to reach. This is like your furthest control over here that I've had to use thus far. But everything else is pretty much right here in easy reach of the driver. Got lots of visibility from the front windshield. Might have to get used to this pillar being down so low, but if you've driven a minivan your whole life, you pretty much get used to it. The engine of the Sienna is very quiet. Actually, the entire ride is very quiet, but we'll cover that here in a bit. I like this unique gauge cluster design that they used for this generation Sienna. So there's an 8,000 tach all the way to the left and a large 110 mile per hour speedometer there. And of course your fuel level and coolant temperature gauges. This van does indeed have 105,000 miles on it. Honestly, I don't think you would even know it if you hadn't seen the odometer on this car. 4-spoke steering wheel, not leather wrapped on this one, but it does have your audio controls as well as your voice command and hands-free phone controls. Steering is very, very effortless. As mentioned, you got your mirror controls, your traction control override. Down here is a storage pocket with integrated coin holder. Your power door override if you don't want to use your power doors. It doesn't have automatic headlights, but it does have daytime running lights with the option to turn off or on. The high beams at night are excellent, by the way. Your front and rear wiper controls are here. The very top of the center stack includes this very small display that'll kind of show you some of the information, like the clock, the outside temperature, remaining fuel range, average vehicle speed, timer, or you can just turn it off. Average fuel economy, eco mode is on, current fuel economy. And then of course you can also go through the entire setup of the vehicle if you choose to. Plus, once it's in reverse, there's a tiny backup camera that is displayed. Honestly, hasn't been too helpful in this particular car just because of how small the screen really is. One of the things that I like the most about this car is this radio. I like how large it is, and the display is just so clear, and it's very also large. But I like it. It's got a good sounding sound system in it. I don't know exactly how many speakers there are at this time and such, but it's a nice one. You can play MP3s and such also with this system. Down below that are your climate controls, which are in a nice, unique fashion. All of your mode settings are basically in this circle here. Your driver controlled temperature here. Fan speed is right here. And your rear controls are here. You can actually lock out the rear controls so they can't use them if you have like kids and such. But you can turn it here, and then from there the rear controls would take over. Or you could just leave it here and control it from there. And the passenger side has their own climate control also. On the other side of that is the gear selector, which is gated. This van does have manumatic shifting, which is really cool. Now, driving with the shifter in this particular spot reminds me of when I was a kid and you would play like those arcade games that had the shifter sitting here. So that's kind of what that reminded me of. Here's the controls for the driver information screen here. And there's a storage pocket with your 12-volt power outlet sitting there. Here's a fun game. Let's count how many cup holders are in the Toyota Sienna. My wife counted them yesterday and she was flipping out. She was so excited with how many cup holders there were. So let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So now you know the Toyota Sienna minivan has 14 cup holders. That was fun. Under those two, there's a small, or a large storage pocket rather, and then down here there's also a large storage space, but you also have a USB and auxiliary input jack for your digital media, and another 12-volt power outlet. This small center console up here has a place to store small items, but you can open it up and it's a really deep console. Ooh, and it's padded at the bottom. How nice. There's even more space in the dashboard. There's a large storage compartment sitting right in front of the passenger. On this one, this door is kind of weak. The other one's weak too, so over time these must just get weak. But there's also a very decently sized glove box sitting there too. Ceiling includes sun visors with lighted vanity mirrors. Up on the ceiling you also have 2 map lights, your rear sliding door controls, your interior lighting controls, and not only a place for a pair of glasses, but a conversation mirror. So you can keep an eye on all of the youngsters that you might have sitting back there if they're misbehaving. So when you're sitting in the second row of this Sienna, you do have climate controls where you can control the temperature and stuff for all your back air vents here. All the vans that I had as a kid never included any rear air. Both of these sliding doors are powered. The sliding doors also include individual cup holders and map pockets on the sides. These windows do go down like your normal front windows would, and all of the back windows include these integrated sunshades in case the sun is blinding you. This Sienna is driven by a 3.5 liter V6 engine. Not 100% sure of the horsepower rating at the moment. But I'll tell you what, for a minivan, this car picks up really nice. And as I mentioned, this engine is also extremely quiet. So for the purpose of this video, I tried to put on my best dad attire. But honestly, this is something that I would probably wear every day, minus the shirt being tucked in. This pavement is very choppy over here. But this van takes all of these bumps like a champ. My Escape isn't even this comfortable. And I thought my Escape was pretty comfortable, but this is like, it's like riding on a cloud compared to my Escape. It would have been cool if I owned like a set of golf clubs that I could use. I wish I had more dad props. So as I've mentioned, the driving position is phenomenal in my opinion. I love looking over the road while sitting very comfortably in this captain's chair with all of my controls nearby. Got plenty of room, lots of headroom. I'm sitting up high and I still have a lot of headroom, so the roofline is definitely one of the strong points of not just this minivan, but other minivans as well. The road noise in this particular minivan is very low. I think the handling of this van is really nice. I had the van all night, and we were taking it to do some errands and stuff, because my original plan was to film all of this last night so I can get the van back early this morning. But unfortunately, I came down with a headache, and I didn't really feel like filming, just because I felt like I would be off my game because of the headache. I couldn't really focus on anything. But it did give me time to, really get to drive this van and just kind of get to know it as we were doing some errands last night. And I am honestly having a blast driving this van. It is just a really nice vehicle to drive. You guys are all probably thinking I'm an idiot or something because I'm praising a minivan, a vehicle that doesn't really get a whole lot of praise from, car enthusiasts, but I would not mind driving this thing every day. I think I would actually like it a lot. But the handling of this van is just, it's phenomenal. It handles so easily. The steering, like I said, is practically effortless. It responds really well, and not only does it respond well, but for how long this vehicle is, I'm really surprised at how tight you can get the steering to turn. I mean, you can get this van to just cut corners so easily. There aren't a whole lot of cars out there that are as long as this that you can get to do that, but the turning radius on this Sienna, in my opinion, is phenomenal. As I mentioned, it gets up and goes really quick. It's really not bad for a minivan. So we're talking about how awesome the minivan is and how much I enjoy driving it. But it also leads to the question, who exactly drives a minivan? Now, the way that I look at it is the majority of people who drive a minivan are probably parents. That's a given. Because you would think, who would just want to drive a minivan if they don't really have a need for a minivan? I could think of a couple of other reasons why somebody would drive a van, but the number one reason is probably because you're a parent and you have a couple of kids, and those couple of kids have a couple of friends, and those couple of friends with your couple of kids like to go places together, or you guys are going to baseball practice, you got to carry all of the baseball equipment in the back. That's typically what the minivan is for. It's a family hauler and friend hauler. I'm the oldest of four in my family, and we had one minivan. There's four of us. You got to picture all of the friends that we had, and my mom was basically driving this minivan for more so our friends because of how many friends we would have over all the time and stuff. So this was not necessarily, well, it was used as the family hauler, but there were many instances where the van was also used to haul us and our friends to many different places. My mom was the neighborhood mom. She took care of not only her own kids, but she was always taking care of our friends also. But other people who would probably have a minivan would be maybe parents who have children that have left the nest, and maybe they like their minivan, so they never got anything newer or anything to replace it, so they're probably still driving a minivan. Somebody who had just gotten their license and are maybe borrowing mommy and daddy's minivan to go to different places. If you're in a band like I was when I was in high school, you borrow your singer's mom's minivan, which happened to be a 95 Lumina APV, and you use that to not only haul your band around, but you haul all of your instruments and the sound equipment in there as well. But with somebody like me who does not have kids, doesn't necessarily need to have a minivan at all, I mean, would it be acceptable for me to purchase this Sienna if I really wanted to? Look at this, train tracks. That was so smooth. That was like butter. Because I'm not gonna lie, if I could get rid of the Escape, I'd buy this. Like, I don't need to have 5 extra seats in my vehicle. It's nice to have the room because you'll never know what you're going to carry, so that's a definite plus. You could always just put the seats down and use it as a cargo hauler all the time. But I just honestly like driving it. Is it socially unacceptable? Maybe. Do I look like a dad while I'm driving this? I think that's what I'm going for today. I'm in a minivan. I tried to put on some father attire, and it's Saturday. I'm just a Saturday morning father out for what? What do fathers do on a Saturday morning? Do they get coffee? I'm sure if they had kids, and then they'd be taking their kids to baseball practice or something. My mom's outside the house. She's gonna have no idea that this is me.
Oh my God, what is this? What? This is huge.
It's a minivan.
That's what minivans look like today?
Yeah.
But you don't sit high.
Oh yeah, you do.
Well, maybe it's just me. Okay, so what's the story on this? Oh, it is a topic of a video. Oh God, you're filming. Oh my God, I'm over here.
This is the best van I've ever driven.
Are you kidding?
Mm-mm. This is like nothing compared to the vans that you used to have.
Yeah, it's a lot of room back there. I remember those days when... What? Get out. Oh my gosh. This is so nice. Yeah, way nicer than what we used to have.
Yeah, they've changed.
Well, yeah, they've upgraded since we've had vans. I liked our vans, every one that we had.
I was throwing that in the video. I was telling the viewers how you were like the neighborhood mom.
Oh.
And how
Yes, I was the Kool-Aid chocolate chip mom. Always had fresh, homemade baked chocolate chip cookies still on the cookie tray. Went out.
it's like TV land stuff.
I not only had 4 kids, I had a lot of
the
kids.
entire neighborhood. Yep. A conversation mirror. So you can use this to keep an eye on everyone that's sitting back there.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's a rounded mirror.
I could have used that back then.
There are 14 cup holders in this car.
Oh my.
That's double the amount of how many people you can fit in here. Longer wheelbase. It's a little wider. There's something about sitting in the, like if you sit in this, you'd feel high.
Oh.
It's not about how low the car is to the ground. It's how this. You want to sit in it? You want to see? I mean, you'd have to move it closer probably, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I do. Wow. Nice. No fighting back there.
The official mom tone in that one.
Oh my. Oh God, this is different. Sorry. This is different. It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
And then there's a camera on the screen.
Oh, it's one of those. Oh, nice. Day.
You too.
Alrighty.
Farewell.
Alrighty. Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, guys, that's going to conclude today's vlog. I do appreciate you guys watching this, and hopefully you guys found this interesting, and hopefully I shared a little more appreciation about the minivan, one of the greatest automobile types of all time. If you enjoyed this vlog, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed this vlog, didn't like this vlog, if you have your take on the minivan segment, don't forget to comment down below, and also subscribe to the channel for other miscellaneous videos about miscellaneous vehicles. You can also check out teespring.com/store/Mike's Vehicle Spotlight for all of your MVS and vlog merchandise. That is all that I've got for today, guys. I will see you guys next time. So thank you so much for joining me today, and take care.